Hello, class. I'd like to give you a historical overview and big picture of the medieval period. So I've uploaded 4 maps. You can download those, and I'd like to give 4 brief, discrete lectures on each one of those maps, just to give you the lay of the land. The first one is called the Roman Empire in the 4th century. So this is before the medieval period. We're covering in this class from 500 to 1500. So this is setting up the table before our period begins. But a couple things. First, there's a page break on this map, and the page break pretty much falls where the Roman Empire was divided between the West and the East. And a couple things to note: in the West, they spoke Latin, were very practical people. They built roads, which still stand to this day. In the East, they spoke Greek and were highly philosophical. Think of famous Greeks, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. So today, the Eastern Church, the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox Church, they love their philosophical doctrines, the Trinity and Christology. In the West, we're much more pragmatic, practical people. Also note, the empire did not go down very far into Africa. That's not because they thought the world was flat and they might fall off the edge of it. I don't think there really was a flat earth society, or it wasn't populated by hardly anyone at all. The ancients knew the world was round. It was a sphere. They also knew there was this torrid zone, this what we call the equator, which went right across the middle of this sphere. And they said, if you try to cross this hot torrid zone, you don't come back. So they knew they were in the northern hemisphere, and they thought there can't be anyone in the south, because how would you get there? Also note, the Roman Empire, it completely surrounds the Mediterranean Sea. They called it the internal sea, or our lake, and it facilitated trade. Also note, this is why the gospel spread west, because Paul's a Roman citizen. He can go anywhere the Roman Empire is. And so Paul says, I'm not going into Persia, into Arabia, to China. I'm a Roman citizen. I'm going to Spain. And he asked the Romans for support to get there. So there's a reason why the Christian faith spread west, because of its connection to the Roman Empire. Of course, the Europeans then brought the gospel to America, and then Americans sent missionaries to Asia and China. Now the Chinese are saying, we want to complete the circle. We can take the gospel through these hard Muslim stand countries and eventually get it back to Jerusalem. Also note, you see that that kind of a squiggly line from Gaul and above Pannonia and Moesia? That's the Danube River. And to the north of the Danube River, you have the barbarians. And the barbarians, well, they really were barbaric. One of them, Albion, he made his wife drink from a goblet formed from her father's skull. So these were barbarians. They're called barbarians for a reason. So they're above the Danube River, the Roman Empire beneath that. And also note that the Danube forms a natural boundary. So if you conquered above the Danube River, you'd have to keep going for quite a while. So it was a natural boundary between the barbarians and the Romans. You see that thin spot between Spain and Gaul. Gaul, of course, basically France, but the Pyrenees Mountains are there. If you conquer past the Pyrenees, you have to keep going until you reach the ocean by Britain, because there's no natural boundary there. But the Danube provided a natural boundary in the north and the east, and the Roman Empire basically circled the Mediterranean Sea. There are 5 major centers of the Christian faith here on the map. Actually, 4 on the map. One I'll give to you. You know Jerusalem, right? Not on this map, but if you put right above the T in Palestine, that's where Jerusalem is. And of course, that's where the Christian faith began. That was a major Christian center where one of the 5 patriarchs were. The second one would be Antioch. That's where we were called Christians first, in Antioch, up there in northern Syria. Alexandria in northern Egypt, a heavily philosophical center of the Christian faith. And then also Constantinople, which is on the east side of where you see Thrace. That's the fourth one, and the fifth one in the Western Empire, Rome. So Rome, Constantinople, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria. These are the five major patriarchs and centers of the Christian faith. Notice that there's only one of them in the west, that's Rome, and that's where the capital was of the Roman Empire. Also, sometimes the capital was moved to Milan, sometimes to Ravenna, but usually Rome was the preferred place. And then in the east, it's Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. Constantine moved his capital there shortly after he became the emperor because it was surrounded on three sides by water. On the west, hills and a steep ravine, so very hard to conquer. In fact, it didn't fall completely until 1453. So pretty good choice on his part. But if Rome in the west and Constantinople in the east are the major, well, they're the capitals, so the west and the east. Well, the east, Constantinople, it's the capital, but it's founded by an emperor. In the west, the other capital, that church there is founded by Peter, and it's where Paul died. It's got a long history of being a major important Christian center. And that's why Rome eventually became the major center of the Christian faith. And its bishop became the Pope, because it's Rome versus Constantinople, one an emperor and the other actually an apostle. So that's why Rome will win. Also note that these barbarians were content to stay above the Danube until the Huns. The Huns were defeated by China, and they swept across Russia, and the Huns made the barbarians nervous and forced them to move. They now had a reason to cross the Danube. They also they were attracted by the Roman Empire, because the Romans were the highest civilization. They were the cultured people, and these were barbarians. And so they wanted in. But you know how sometimes you can mess up a party by joining the party, or mess up the club by joining it? So the barbarians wanted this Roman elite culture, but they did mess it up just by joining and kind of brought down the temperature. The barbarians, by the way, mostly Germanic tribes, so they were strong and fierce, but not a lot of culture yet. But the Romans let them in because, well, they really couldn't keep them out. And also they thought, okay, we'll let you in, but we'll make you, each one of your tribes, you can be a division in the army. So we'll make you our army. And so we'll let you in, and now you can help us keep the Huns out. And this would have worked except for the Romans forgot to pay the army. And the barbarians said, well, hey, we're the army, let's go get paid. And so they eventually attacked the capital. And that happened first in, 410, which was a big deal. The Visigoths, by the way, the Visigoths just mean the Western Goths. And so the Visigoths ended up ultimately in Spain in the west, but they attacked in 410 and plundered Rome. And that was a big deal because Rome had stood, 5 centuries of being the dominant player, and it had been pagan for most of that time until 100 years before, when Constantine says, okay, I'm the emperor, and now I'm a Christian, and the Christian faith is going to replace paganism. Well, shortly after that, Rome fell. And so the Romans said, oh my goodness, what have we done? We've given ourselves to a God who can't protect us. Well, Augustine responded with an apologetic called The City of God. And the City of God, Augustine is trying to explain why it's actually been the Christian God who's protected you all this time. And it's not our fault, not his fault, certainly, that the Roman Empire has now fallen. But that was a huge deal in 410. In 452, the Vandals, not the Van Andals, that's a Grand Rapids army, but the Vandals, the Vandals? Sorry. 430, not 452, but 430, the Vandals attacked Hippo. So Augustine writes his City of God in 410, when the Visigoths sacked Rome and tried to defend the Christian faith. But in 430, as he is dying, the Vandals are attacking Hippo. By the way, Hippo on your map, it's between North Africa, between the A, Mauritania, and the N in Numidia. Put an X there and put Hippo. So Augustine saw, as he's dying, his town being overrun. In 452, then, the Huns attacked Rome. They finally broke through the barbarian armies. And as they're besieging the city, the Bishop of Rome, Leo, goes out to plead with them to please stop, just go back. He doesn't know this, but Attila has gone too far. He's looking for a reason to save face and retreat. And so he says, fine, I'll leave you alone. Whoa, Leo's a hero. You did it. I can't believe you spared the city. Well, 3 years later, in 455, the Vandals now are sieging Rome. And Leo goes out a bit more confident this time. But what he doesn't know is that the Vandals are not as desperate as Attila was to just save face and retreat. And so Leo has to settle for 2 weeks looting, which, yeah, still, thanks, he saved us, I guess. But as Leo steps into this power vacuum, the Bishop of Rome becomes more significant. One last thing I want you to notice about this is the Christian faith. So, of course, it started in Jerusalem and then Antioch. But the theological birthplace, the theological cradle of the Christian faith was North Africa. Sometimes you might hear or maybe even think that the way we teach theology here is far too white and far too European. That's not true. The way we teach theology here is we teach the great tradition. And the great tradition began in Palestine, in Eastern faith, and then theologically it developed in North Africa. So the number one theologian of, I think, the whole church, but certainly the Western church, is Augustine, and he's in Hippo. The Eastern church says their favorite theologian is Origen. Origen, well, he's in Alexandria. Cyprian is a major early theologian, churchman. Well, he's in Carthage, which is just off the toe of Italy. There's Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, so many significant theologians in the early church period were Africans, North Africans. Athanasius, they called Athanasius the Black Dwarf because he was short and because he was black. Now, I don't think the skin color matters here, but the important point is we're not just teaching a white theology. We're teaching theology which was birthed, developed, formed in North Africa. Yes, it was, and we'll see in this class, we'll spend all of our time in Europe in this class because of the Muslim invasion. The Muslims swept across North Africa in the 7th and 8th century. And because of that, it pushed the church into Europe. So yes, in the Middle Ages, Christendom, it is very European. But just remember, the reason is because of the Muslims and their armies. And it's not European at the expense of Africa. We are teaching the great tradition, which began in Palestine, in Jerusalem. The major headquarters then shifted to North Africa, which then shifted to Europe. And today, then it probably did shift to certainly the Great Britain and then to America. Today, it might very well be in the South. The center of the Christian faith and its theological development, its headquarters, it does keep shifting, and we think that's a good thing. So this class, we are focusing on a lot of European history and theologians, but just know we don't think that's the whole thing. That's just for this 1,000-year period, that's where the major activity was. It wasn't happening in North Africa in the church because that was all Muslim lands, and still is, sadly, to this day. But that's the first map, and we'll do the other ones coming up. Thanks.